Thank you. Thank you. I don't have a whole lot of extra funny stuff this season, but I kvetched about it yesterday to the director and a few people. You know, I'm pretty much a straight man on this show, but I still have so much fun doing it. Yeah. And it's a part. I play a part. And he's such a very, very good comedy actor, comedian, that it's a pleasure to watch him work and to see what he is. This guy is some extraordinary man, extraordinary creative humorist. Go ahead, make me up.
It's all ad-lib, is that right, the show?
It's not ad-lib. There's a big difference between improv and ad-lib.
Okay.
Ad-lib is to think of a clever remark or to speak off the cuff. Improv is to live a role and to play the role. Right. Sometimes you can improv on a subject, but you have to remember that if you're going there, you're really improvising. You're not just doing some clever little ad-lib thing, which is a clever moment. No, improv is really digging deep into yourself and bringing out who you are, what you are. So there's a lot of personal admissions when you're, it's very confessive when you're doing it.
Well, that's your specialty, is confession.
Well, yeah, confession, yeah, I guess. Yeah, but also...
What was the one that was? It just re-aired again. The special section. I mean.
Oh yeah, well.
The mother gets.
Well, when he didn't, I didn't want to tell him that his mother was dead. Yeah, I loved that. I loved doing that.
That was amazing.
That was. I started calling you. I remember. Where was I still in Hawaii? I think so. When I first started, you knocked me out. I mean, I know you was an actor. I know you over a long period of time, but there were just such brilliant moments in that thing, you know?
Well, the improvisation is the technique, and where your own sense of truth will emerge. And what happens with a performance that is improvised in that way is there's no way you're going to lie. It's just not going to happen. If you're doing it, it's got to show. So you don't trust it if you're unless you're supposed to be lying, you don't trust it. It will always be obvious. I recall this year there is some ambiguity in one question. I can't go into detail about it because I want you to see it. But he thinks I've said something, and then I have to deny it, of course. Well, the big problem was that my denial, he believed, and we have to leave the ambiguity for the audience so they'll worry about this situation. And we can't give them any determination on this. So about 4 or 5 times we shot it, and he kept complaining, hey, I believe you that you didn't do it. And we're killing the ambiguity. Well, I didn't know how to kill the ambiguity. I couldn't, have shifty eyes. I'm not an indicative actor, and that is what actors do. That tells you that you're not dealing with a fine actor when they indicate an emotion. It's very hard suddenly when the script says she cries. Boy, is it hard to come up with that. But you'll find that in the really good actress, it'll be there. In the really good actor, it'll be there. But in most cases, when they go to close up and they say, don't hold your head here. No, you're leaning too far to your right. Over here. All right, fine. Hold it right there. Now go ahead and feel, Well, sometimes there will be an indication of weeping, and it's not good. It's embarrassing to watch, and it's very difficult for the actress or the actor to summon. That's all. If you're true, it'll happen.
I just want to... Bob, are you going to be over here?
I am.
Okay.
And I have my cell phone sound.
You can't move my
Okay,
furniture like that.
Well,
How dare you?
This is interesting because I know that you.
Real quickly, if I could just interrupt, when the clock chimes, if you are speaking or if you guys are speaking,
You want to stop that clock?
I'm not sure if it's possible, but
I'll tell you what. Just reach down, open that door on the key, reach down, and just stop the pendulum.
Oh, okay.
Just stop it.
You can just stop time on command.
That's all. That's it. Just leave the door open so I'll remember to reset it.
Valley, yes.
Thank you very much.
There's another way to handle it, but
Stop time.
all right.
Well, but this is interesting what you're talking about, Mr. Berman, because you are a studied actor, and it's what you began your professional career pursuing. But you've been all these different roles throughout your life. You've been labeled as a comedian, as a tragi-comedian, and Gerald Nachman called you the founding father of the school of persecuted comedians. You were a writer, a humorist, entertainer, and we were talking about what all these terms mean, and how would you typify what you do?
To simplify it, I'm a Renaissance man, let's face it. I'm busy. I don't know what I am. All I know is that if I can do it, I'll do it. And I like to write. I like to teach. When I'm good at it, it's wonderful. But you can't really always be good at it. I feel really that the thing I should have done and stuck with, even if I died, was be only a theatrical actor. Maybe go into films. But I just had to make a living, and I gave in. So I took my improvisations where I created about a half a dozen phone calls when I was improvising with Compass Players in Chicago. This became Second City. And when the company moved to St. Louis, to the Crystal Palace in St. Louis, I just couldn't earn $55 a week anymore. I couldn't do that. And my wife I said, can I come back to New York? We lived at 6 Jones Street in New York. We were in the Greenwich Village. And I said to Sarah, listen, the company's going to St. Louis. I'd like to come home for a bit. She says, why don't you get a job first? I said, don't you love me? I love you, but better you get a job. Well, she was right, because I'd always come home to Mama. That was it. She had supported me for years while I struggled as an actor. When I started to write for Steve Allen, write sketches for him on a freelance basis, I was making a living. But then I got called to do improvisational theater, and boom, up went the living. And she's the one who said, go. Now she's saying, stay. Well, I needed to earn a living. So I took a few of these. I went to a nightclub on Rush Street in Chicago, and I saw a fellow working without telling jokes. I thought stand-up comedians always told gags, jokes. My girlfriend is so ugly that. My mother-in-law is so fat that. These jokes were stock in trade. Or they would do, at that time, they would do a homosexual. At that time, it was a fairy or a queer, and all they had to do was lisp and mince a little bit, and people were screaming with laughter. So you got that, and you had a few other things you can rely on in order to get the audience laughing. And I knew I couldn't do that. I just knew I couldn't do that. But I saw this guy with a newspaper under his arm, wearing a sweater. He wasn't dressed properly. And he was killing them on such a level of speed and excitement. There was so much going on in that room, a jazz room where jazz singers had come. And I saw this fellow just doing his own kind of jazz. Wow, did it knock me out. And I thought, wow, he doesn't use jokes. And I thought, I've got these phone calls maybe and they don't have jokes in them, but maybe I can get laughter. And so I wangled at an audition at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago. And I didn't even know how to say hello to an audience. Breaking the fourth wall was anathema to me. You get on stage, you're an actor, you do your thing. So I sat down in front of an audience, didn't say hello, didn't say good evening, thank you, nothing. Dialed the phone and went into a phone call, and pretty soon they're laughing. And the laughter grew. Now, incidentally, I wouldn't do that yet because in improv, while I was working with Compass, I always felt you don't make a phone call standing up. It's ridiculous. So you sit down. So I used a chair to sit down. And when I went into this club, I realized if I sit down on a chair, they're not going to see me in the back. This was a low stage. So I asked if I could borrow a bar stool. So now they're all filled up. I said, but if I sit down, well, can't you stand? You know, you'll have authority if you stand. I said, well, I don't know about authority, but I do know that I have to do something and I have to sit. All right. So they got somebody to give up his bar stool up there. And they brought the bar stool down. I sat down on that and I realized, wow, I've got it. I don't have to stand for the authority. That's number one. Number two, there's a kind of graceful ease to know you can reach everybody in the room. So I did the phone, and they were laughing. And I did another one, and they screamed. And I stopped just after the two routines. And the boss took me outside and says, all right, 4 weeks at $350 a week. I almost fainted. With an option for another 4 weeks at the same rate. On the phone, Sarah, now it was May, toward the end of May, and I was to go in there on June 17. I said, Sarah, I've got a job. Can I come home? Yeah. So I went home and I created another, just by myself, which I had never done before, created another improvisation by myself in a room, just talking out loud to myself. So I had another routine, so I could do 2 different shows, because I didn't feel that the other phone calls would work in that room. I would use them eventually, and they did work, but I needed a more surefire. So I had 2 different shows that I could do. And I would do 2 shows a night, except on Friday and Saturday Friday and Saturday when I would do 3 shows. So I could do, well, because I would alternate the first show and the third show. So I now had an act, and I was working in nightclubs. I opened the show for a woman by the name of Anita O'Day, who was an extraordinarily gifted singer. She knew music. She became an instrument when she got on that stage. The way she worked with the 3 musicians, the way she handled them, and the way she handled herself. And I remember my aunt came to see the show, and afterwards my aunt said to me, that girl hasn't got much of a voice. So I just didn't know how to explain to her this. She didn't have to have a voice. She could whisper. She's so gigantically talented. She could whisper, because the rhythm she had and the way she broke it into such segments, the way she handled her music. Well, I would do that. And I would open the show at another time for a young woman by the name of Della Reese. And she was another. So I was opening the show, but I met this fellow now that I liked so much, Mort Saul, and he said, you should make a recording. I'm with a company. who makes records, and they have Ella Fitzgerald, and they have somebody else, and they have me, and maybe you. So why don't you let them? So I called them, and they said, okay, and because I figured, what the hell, at least my name will be on an album, and it'll be in a window. So they named it. I didn't know how to name it. They named it Inside Shelley Berman. And wow, I was now a professional comedian with my acting thing. My third job, or fourth job, I guess, was in Quebec at a nightclub, opening a show for a guy named Billy Eckstein, a black guy who had powerful, powerful sound, who said to me after my first night there, he said, tonight, Shelley, when you're introduced, just go out there, look at them for a moment, say thank you and good evening. Try it. So I can't do that, Billy. I work differently. Try it. It won't take away your uniqueness, Shelley. Just acknowledge that they're there. Just give it a whirl. Can't do it. So for 2 nights, I refused to do it, and he nagged at me. I can't dream such a fine artist would be such a miserable nag. Try it. So I went out there and I said, thank you, good evening. Well, it yielded about twice the laughter from the same stuff. So the next show, I said, thank you and good evening. And then before doing the next routine, I said, I don't know if you're upset as I am about a certain thing. And I introduced the piece, and it was, wow, it was enormous. And I learned, but I would learn much later, that there was much more that had to be done in order to be a comedian. This took me a long time. One of the things was to learn that the audience isn't there to respond to you. They're there to simply enjoy you. I was a kind of lover who felt that if a woman didn't scream, well, what the hell was it? So I would manipulate the audience to get what I needed. It was wrong. It took me a little while. Then I would learn from another comedian by the name of Fat Jack Leonard, who called me a little cocker. He'd come and see me at my show. He'd say, you're pretty good, man. You're pretty good. You're pretty good, you little cocker. But you're no comedian. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you're no comedian. But they're around the block to see me, Jackie. They're laughing at what I do. Yeah, but you're no comedian. So how will I know? You'll know. It took some time before I knew that by virtue of their sitting in the seat, they have offered first kiss in this love affair, and you didn't have to make them. It was already done. Now just proceed. And even when they didn't laugh sometimes, I still, for some reason I cannot explain, still liked them. I really began to like them. And liking them was such a payoff for me, because I could go off stage and not cry if they didn't laugh. I could go off stage and say, well, hey, I had a good time with them. And there were times when I did enjoy my show, where I felt pretty damn good, where they weren't obliged to give me all of that confidence. I still want them to do that, but I don't want to demand it. And one night, he came to see me, and I had a nice show. So, okay, you're a comedian. A few years later, he would come to see me again. This tough man, he was such a tough man. He used to call Don Rickles his road company. But it was an opening night, and he came downstairs from his room upstairs in this hotel. Beautiful pair of pearl cufflinks. In those days, we were spruced up with our French cuffs. And anyway, he saw the show. And after the show was an opening night, we'd have a whole big reception. There was a lot of people there, the agents, the buyers, and everybody was there. I was a real big shot. And, but no Jackie. Called his room. Yeah. Why aren't you here? No. Come on, Jackie, what's the matter? I don't want to, never mind. I don't feel like going. What? Why not? I don't know. I left the party and went down. I went upstairs to his room. Knock. Yeah. Can I see you? It's me. Yeah, what do you want? I want to see you. Open the door. Jackie, what the hell's the matter? Why can't you come to the reception? Couldn't wear the fucking cufflinks.
Oh my God, that's sweet.
That sensitive man. He was sensitive about it. Anyway, he finally came to the party. But it was only after I assured him that there was a great deal of love and appreciation for him. But then, anyway, you asked me how I became a comedian. So that's all. That's really what happened. Today, there's a whole thing about the stool. It's not psychic. It is not an indulgence. It's not a habit. It's a real, honest-to-God, serious piece of property. So serious that I had stools made in order to travel with them. I have a stool in a case back there in another room that I'll travel with. It dismantles, folds up neatly, but it's kind of a pain in the neck, but I have to have it. I do an act in which I use the stool, use it, literally use the weight of it. If I lean forward into a microphone, many stools, particularly the wooden ones that sometimes you're forced to have on the road, will tip. They tip forward, so you never feel quite sure or balanced on the stool. And yet I need it because I use it so much. I'm with it so much. And there are routines that I do where I have to have the stool, like eating popcorn in a movie. I have to have that because if I'm not seated, the people can't see the things that I do. I have embarrassing moment that I do about when you're trying to sit down and you forget that you think for a moment that the chair isn't there. I don't know if you've ever been, but that's one of the big laughter moments. If the top spins, I can't do it. It'll spin out of my hands and I can fall. So when I plead for a stool to have I need a bar stool. I need to work on it. I need that height. I need what I'm asking for. You know something? I must tell you. It cannot be provided. It absolutely cannot be provided. I will tell the world this. The idea is, I think, born in the notion, and you probably need this more than you need to pity me, the notion that the stand-up comedian is exactly that. What the stand-up comedian needs is his microphone. The violinist plays a violin. The trumpeter plays a trumpet. The bass violinist plays a bass viol. The pianist plays a piano. The comedian plays his microphone. You get up there, you tell your jokes. A comedian tells jokes. You tell jokes that have a setup and a punchline, and that's the way it goes. You don't need light other than a spotlight. Who the hell do you think you are? You're being demanding and unreasonable. What do you ask for, a fade? Are you asking for a light effect? You're a comic, for God's sake. Well, it's part of what makes a miserable, miserable life for me. It's part of what makes it a joy to be working on Curb. Because you keep pleading with people to understand your special need. That's all. Not to be different, not to be a pain in the ass, but to just give me what I need to do my job in peace and let me do my work. Let me tell you something. You don't get that. You don't get it. You want to love the audience? You want to get out there and have a great time with them? Go out and do it on our terms, mister. Because we know what you are. You're a comedian. You play microphone. That's been my life. And it has made a wreck of me in many, many cases. Don't screw up my act. Do not screw up my act. I do a telephone monologue. I play with telephones. The whole idea is telephones. You ring a telephone backstage when I'm working, you may hurt me terribly.
How have you overcome some of those challenges?
Huh?
How have you overcome some of those challenges? Because you just gave the example of some time where you were hurt badly because someone really misrepresented what it was you were doing, not as you're describing it now very clearly, I think, that all you want is something very simple to happen in a controlled environment.
Yes.
And if you disturb it, then you can't do your job.
That's correct.
So I wonder, the obstacles like this in your career, how are you able to overcome these things?
You don't. You compromise most of the time, but you have to try. You're obliged because it's your life. Your career is your life. You equate it with your existence. So you try. You have to, but you're not always politic. You're not always going to explain yourself well. It's very hard sometimes to explain it. You haven't got the time to talk about a stool the way I've talked about it to you. I've never had the chance to really discuss it with anybody the way I've just said it to you. It is a real, live, honest-to-God need. It's not an indulgence. Recently, I was on tour, and I said I have to have a certain kind of stool, and the fellow who was running the show really was an honest young man who was trying to help us. He ran the show. He was our roadie. And I said, here's the kind of stool I need. If we can arrange it, he said, I'll do what I can, Mr. Berman. I want you to be comfortable. No, try to understand me. It's not a comfortable thing for me. It's a real need of a certain kind of thing so that I can work it. I understand. I'll make sure you're comfortable. That, honest to God. And as a matter of fact, I said it again and got the same answer. It's for my comfort. Well, if it's thought of on that level, it's not going to be handled. If you can't penetrate that, it won't be handled. So you do the best you can with what they give you.
Well, can't you parallel that with, if you were Pablo Casals and you wanted to, your instrument, you wanted to relate to whatever if you're a prop comedian or whatever type of an artist you are, you need your specific tool. I'll use the word instrument again. So that stool is, you're not playing microphone, you're playing
stool. I'm playing.
I know you have fun with that word. You know, if you're going to laugh at that.
I know, but I use it even for the joke. But it's really, it's a significant problem. And other comedians have other similar problems. They'll ask for something, but that illusion of what a comedian is, and it's not only an illusion, it's a determination, it's absolutely set. A comedian stands at the microphone and tells jokes. And that's the way he makes them laugh. In the thing about pictures that we saw in this ARP bulletin, each one had a joke put under his name. Because you're able to say it. So you can say it. When you have a little anecdotal joke, you can say it. That stands, it can tolerate print. But in my case, I borrowed a joke. It's an old joke, which I told to an audience as an example of the kind of problem I run into when I have to tell a joke. So I get quoted as, that's my joke. It's not my joke. I heard it from a guy who is I'm much better than I am at telling a joke. His name is Jim McGeorge. He's a great comedian. He's a joke-telling comedian. And it's one of his jokes. It was very interesting. He called me up. He said, did you see the thing in ARP? I said, no. I said, well, he didn't tell me about the joke. Then I looked at the thing in ARP, and there it was, the joke. I hadn't seen it. He wasn't calling to complain. He was calling to remind me that, hey, well, it wasn't his joke to begin with, but still, that's where I heard it. But I'm so enamored with that guy's work. He's one of the greatest joke tellers in the world. He's got such an attitude. He's so diffident, so off balance. He's just wonderful to watch. And he tells a joke better than most people, better than, I think, just about anybody, Jim McGeorge. So I wrote a poem about him, about his work. And it got published recently. It's a nice poem.
Will you do the poem for us?
Huh?
Do you know it by heart?
I don't know it by heart. I write so much poetry.
We could remind people that he plays the part of Stan Laurel in the. They're not running now, but he's been. He becomes
Laurel and Hardy. A commercial, but he played Laurel. And the poem's downstairs. As a matter of fact, I've been transcribing my poetry because I do so much poetry. And I teach it over at the Motion Picture Home. I'm a volunteer at the Motion Picture and Television Fund. So I run a poetry thing. And I've got a nice group coming in. And we're getting ready for a recital. So I've shown them how to write free verse, some of them. And some of them are doing such good work.
I'm put in mind of you and Dick Cavett trading eights. Who was it? It was
Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit. T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
And I remember I wanted to be smarty, and I said, "Oh yeah, he writes." Thinking E.E. Cummings, I said,
"No,
no."
I know, but you got thrown by the initials T.S. Eliot, yeah. But E.E. Cummings, it's not that far away from him, incidentally, in terms of era. So E.E. Cummings, I like his too. Maggie and Millie and Molly and me, and May.
If you were to talk about a peer group in terms of the actor, comedian, who do you admire?
I think I can't go through this without talking about Sid Caesar as an actor comedian, Jackie Gleason as an actor comedian, Jack Benny as an actor comedian. It's very hard for me to think of good comedians who really aren't who are not good actors. Certainly, Robin Williams has proved himself. I don't think he's proved himself with all the villains he's played or the bad guys or all that other stuff. But I think he proved Good Morning Vietnam. Wow, just dynamite, and where he played the poetry teacher.
Dead Poets. Dead Poets Society.
Dead Poets Society. Yes, he's a very, very good actor, and so you see that. You see the same thing is happening with Steve Martin, who writes beautifully, writes wonderful prose, good acting plays, and so he's got some talent. So you see actors working. Sid Caesar never got his real chance in film to do the kind of thing he should have been able to do, and might have wanted to do, but you get stuck in a kind of look. They gave Jackie Gleason a couple of movies where he played, but when he played Fats Domino, not Fats Domino, Minnesota Fats Domino. No, I wouldn't cast him as Fats Domino, but Minnesota Fats, he was marvelous. He's just marvelous.
Talking about all these Renaissance men, like we were saying at the beginning, very multifaceted. It sounds, the way you're describing it is different from, I think, how a lot of people think of a comedian, in that you take comedy very seriously.
Well, maybe I take it too seriously. But I don't think you can take it too seriously. I think the comedians throughout history are the only ones who have been able to speak because they find a way to do it. And it is called the other way to do it. They are the ones who invariably have the wisdom, or at least use wisdom, in order to get a message across. Obliquely, you just tiptoe sometimes, you just snap them on the nose a little bit, and you get it said. But you're saying something very, very true, and something that resonates frequently. So, barring myself, let's say, you go to where Shakespeare found the most sane comments, and the most safely sane comments were by his clowns. All of them remarkable. Were able to say what has to be said without incurring the wrath of the individual hearing. King Lear's fool was the only straight comment, sensible comment being made throughout that play. That is not uncommon for the so-called fool to be able to say it. Sometimes he says it in mime. Marcel Marceau used to say things. He said things about love that most people couldn't get across ever, about foolishness. I think political humorists who are not really satirists, that's another word. They just don't want to call them comedians, so they call them satirists. The satirist is another special kind of guy. Swift had satire, could do it. Voltaire, they could do it. Candide was a great satire. The best of all possible worlds was marvelous because the world just kept caving in. But the comedy geniuses who are doing political humor have a way of sliding around a corner and surprising you, or tickling that fancy of yours without realizing what he's been saying. You know, as a teacher, I find, and I teach humor writing, literary and dramatic. So I teach prose, I teach essays. The constant thing that I remind my students of is, in the marginal marking, find a better way to say it. If you say, and I have students who say it right out, George W. Bush is a damned fool. Okay, fine. I want you to know you had an opportunity to make us laugh and you didn't. I want you to know that you've just gone ahead and without outflanking us, without doing anything, you just smashed right into somebody's face. So, okay, fine. Maybe some idiot will find it funny, but others won't. Find the way to say it. One of my essays that I'm reading, a good friend's work, but she felt it would be funny to finish that sentence with dog shit. Those were the words. All right, fine, that's fine, but it doesn't make me laugh. All it does is make me upset, sets me a little bit, and maybe you could find another way to say it. If you can't find another way to say it, throw it out. It isn't worth it. So sweat it out. Irma Bombeck could say everything. Could say that her daughters were using her underwear, her daughters were using her toothbrush. You could say, but she knew how to say it. And she always made me laugh. Dave Barry. He can say the most outrageous things, but he says it in a way that's going to make you laugh. He doesn't say it flat out. Well, the humorist invariably has the way to say it. And thank God for them.
This reminds me of, I was watching an old Judy Garland show that you were on, and there was this brilliant skit where many phones are ringing, and a guy is considering committing suicide. But the way that you handle the skit, the audience is laughing because they're empathizing with you more so even than the guy on the phone. And you manage to keep it light, even though there's some serious things underlying.
Well, thank you for that. But yes, of course, it's a serious. Well, yes, in the writing of a good comedy play, you have a serious matter. In the writing of your better comedies, you have it predicated upon a serious need. A play, Aristotle says it, a play is an action. An action is a conflict. Well, how does a conflict manifest itself but in a series of obstacles for the person who is seeking to fulfill a life-serving need? That's the action. A man wants to save his sinking automobile business, his imported automobile business. It's going to hell. That's a very serious matter. It's a life-serving need to save the business. That's the way you live. So that's an action. That is really an action. Man has to do that. Well, what is the conflict? Well, the conflict is simply that the money is in the family, but it's in the hands of a brother who is autistic. Well, what's he going to do? But he's got to bring that brother back to California and see what he can do about it. So now you have an activity, not an action, but the activity is to bring him back. But it's always going to involve the manifestation of obstacles. It's going to involve that. The conflict has to be alive. So you'll run into, so fine, but it's a serious matter. This autistic guy is going to be a problem.
Are there certain tools that are, you've said before, you can't teach someone to be funny, but you can teach how to write funny.
The technique, well, you can teach him how to access, you can teach that person how to access his own fount of humor. And incidentally, I can't say his or her. I can't stand that anymore. His or her, yeah. Well, each person, yeah. But I can't use the plural. Will each person take their book? I can't do that. I can't do that. I grew up a different way. I'm a prescriptivist when it comes to grammar. I'm not a descriptivist who says, if the kid makes it clear, what's the difference? Sure, let's just keep it up that way. And in a few years, the kid will be able to say, I came, I seen, I conquered. And everybody will be happy with that child, That, it's insanity. Anyway, I forgot what the hell I was talking about.
Well, we were talking about whether there were certain tools, like how you would handle describing such a conflict. It seems that in your own humor, you handled it by having yourself be the butt of the joke.
Well, it doesn't matter who's the butt of the joke. But, yes, you don't lash out at that. You just put yourself in that problem. That's all. But in one case, an old routine that I do today, and that's the woman hanging from a window of a department store. Well, I'm trying to save that woman's life. But the bureaucracy is intruding. But you see, it's really not about that woman, and it's not about me. It's about bureaucracy. So in effect, this routine is a satire. But it's got to be a funny satire. So I've put myself in the middle of it.
Is there a trick to uncovering what makes people laugh? Is it pretty much something that you've...
Oh, no, well, there is no trick to uncover what makes people laugh. That's like putting it in the singular. You can't do that. There is no trick. There are some people, well, it's sort of, humor relies on surprise. Yeah, this humor relies on surprise. What about that humor? So you can't really, I don't know, scholars have been trying for years to tell us what humor is, or what's funny is, comedy is. Even a guy that I was so fond of, that is gone now, Steve Allen, was so brilliant, couldn't do it. There was always something left out. Say, okay, but what about this, Steve? You could always do that. And he'd listen. But if you have to say what humor is, if you have to define it, you're going to need a hell of a lot bigger mind than is sitting in this room. It's going to take such a mass intelligence, unless that brain was the size of this room. I don't know if you'd ever get a satisfactory answer to what is humor.
The phrase change of cognitive structure, leading him down path A, but it ends up path B. Just what you said, the surprise.
That's the one thing.
Yeah, I've heard that described exactly. That this is the umbrella over overall humor.
Yeah, well, that's one way to make us laugh. Surprises. I wouldn't dare. I don't know first thing about it. If you want to, that's the truth. I don't know what the hell it is. I know this, that if you confess what your little dirty little sins are, you're going to get a whole audience laughing because they all have the same dirty little sin. I would suppose that for the comedian and the literary humorist, I would suppose that the confessional generally is everything. At least it does encompass an awful lot. And when the people are laughing, you're hearing a massive Me Too. Even if it's not a literal occasion, but it's enough. People will recognize. So that's one way. That's really about the way I guess I do it. But thank God for me, because I have so many rotten things about me that I can keep confessing forever.
But what's interesting is that it seems your humor, it evolves out of a real situation that's happened to you that people can identify with, but there's always a little twist, a little something. It's not literal.
No, it can't be literal.
Why?
I don't know. I don't think it'll work if it's literal. For the same reason you just can't say George W. Bush is stupid. You can't do that. You find a way to make a point. But one of the things is delicacy. Forget fairness. You don't have to be fair. But at least delicacy, at least a fine way to say it. But no, I don't know what I do. I really don't know. I haven't really analyzed what I do. All I know is that I try very hard to be funny. Frankly, when I was on tour with Billy recently, I was on, I can't remember, but one night I decided to tell the audience when I went out there that I was at a party tonight earlier, and my wife wasn't along, so there was a lot of people, and I saw this beautiful, beautiful young woman sitting in a corner. And I walked over to her and I said, "Hello." And she said to me, "I swim, I jog, I love junk food. Even I get constipation." I always said, "I wish you hadn't told me that." But now, in this case, is a kind of satirization of a commercial. But why is it so satirical? What is that recognized fact? And that is, sometimes we all get constipation. And if we didn't all get it sometimes, we wouldn't know what the hell she was talking about or I was talking about. But it does spoil the day when a beautiful girl admits she gets constipation. Sometimes even I get constipation. Come on. Don't bother me with that. And then there are a few other things, this Cialis stuff and Viagra stuff. If it lasts for more than 4 hours, seek immediate medical attention. The hell I will. I'd rather die than give it up. If I have to, I'll sell it. Now, that is humor that I'm using. I'm using it on a stage in front of an audience. It works because I don't say what it is. They have to tell me what I'm talking about. That's the delicacy. See? But a current comedian and a current audience sometimes are demanding to be told what it's about. When I saw Gone with the Wind the first time, this guy carried that beautiful woman upstairs and into that bedroom. They dissolved, and there she was in bed the next day with a big smile on her face. Today, you go into that bedroom. You watch them undress, or they frantically tear off each other's clothes. And then you have to watch the act for as much as they can tell you, and that's pretty much. What have we lost here? Where is the gain in artistry? If we are no longer trusting of humanity, if we don't trust the audience, if we have to hand feed them before they'll know they're eating, what the hell is the gain? Well, the same thing is happening with comedy. We hand it to you. Have you seen the one where they're selling rubbers? Huh? Have you seen the one where they don't sell you rubbers, but they'll send you something to give you to do that? You know, but they'll hand it to you. Do we have to be told that? Can't we just acknowledge that these are very intelligent people out here? Take the chance. We can fill it all in. But comedy will suffer terribly if we have to do this. Well, I'm constantly on the alert for it. I'm a crab, I'm a nag about it in the writing right now of my students. The young people. I have to tell you something. I don't know what it is, what the intimidation level is. I don't know what it is that makes it happen. But the young women are far more vulgar than the men. Far more upsetting than the men in the use of language and the use of concepts. So what the hell are you trying to prove? So I go after them. Is it because you equate yourself with the men or want to equate yourself with men and you think that men are the really vulgar ones? Is that why you have to use a term like dog shit? While the guy next to you wouldn't dare or wouldn't bother? I'm listening. Now you take a look at this. Go to Def Comedy Jam someday. Look in on Def Comedy Jam. Don't try to count the motherfuckers because you'll never catch up. But look at who's saying it, and look at what's being said, and look at the sex of the individual saying it. You gotta be kidding. If you're a woman and you want to tell me what it's like to go down on your boyfriend, have you looked at his comedy? He's not saying it about you. He's not saying what he does. He wouldn't bother. It's happening. It's happening. And I'm really fed up with it.
We've been talking a lot this week about how in the past, the older sitcoms like the Steve Allen Show, the censors wouldn't have let them get away with saying these kind of words that you get away with now. And it forced a bigger challenge for the writers to trust the audience and take those kind of chances with the audience. And we think, created perhaps better comedy.
You don't give the creative artists credit for having the taste? You think it was because they would have been censored?
Yeah, it's funny. I seconded the emotion when Jenny was talking about that. It's a matter, I think, and I'd ask for your corroboration, that it's now become a gross out contest. Once that line was passed, somebody had to do this far, this more. You give a 5, I'll give a 6, I'll give a 7, and so. We had discussed that, and if you could amplify on the license, the restrictions that we had then. The one-liner I've used for years is when we were on TV, you couldn't show a close-up of the stork on Zoo Parade. Image, and it was so true. No hell, no damn. A little bit, even in burlesque, where you could have a bare bosom, you couldn't do that.
Well, that harkens back to the old, I'm talking about vaudeville, the Orpheum Circuit, where they had a list of rules. But, no, we were more inclined to keep it neat. There was a time. But the artists were equally inclined to keep it neat, but the public was inclined to keep it neat. When we said it off stage, but we knew we couldn't say it on stage, or on a camera. We couldn't do it. But the artists found the humor best, not because they were being restricted. That only told them what they couldn't do. But think of all they could do and what they did, without the restriction, without worrying about violating. I think the artists themselves were the best ones to control that work. But it wasn't only for dirty against clean. It wasn't only that. It was another thing. It was the market. It was the buyer of the show who was saying, "Hey, we better not offend." So those weren't restrictions that were set up by standards and practices necessarily. Listen, I did the dinosaur show. I had an experience on a dinosaur show. It was a Sunday night show. It was a wonderful variety show when I was her guest. And I did a phone call where my girlfriend is telling me all of the things I do that are wrong. And I mean, Shirley, if you don't like me, if you're against, if there's something that you have, something against me, I wish you would, just tell me what it is, and I'll try to correct it. Go right ahead. Yeah, what else? Yeah, what else? Yeah, what else? Yeah, what else? Shirley, have you got these written down somewhere? Yeah. Well, Shirley, now I think you're really going wrong here, because the truth is, when two people are holding hands, can anyone ever be really sure whose hand is doing the sweating? Well, Shirley, that's one thing a guy can't fight, sweat. All right? They came to my dressing room, said, it's a Sunday night show, and the word sweat is a very unpleasant word. So can you change that? I went to my dressing room, tried to think, what the hell could I say? Because it was a very good joke. So I came out with moisture. I said, that's a better word. So what happened on the television show that night was, oh, Shirley, I really think you're stretching that one a little bit, But when two people are holding hands, can anyone ever be sure just whose hand is doing the moisting? That's one thing a guy can't fight, moisture. All right. Now, it turns out that moisture has an ambiguity about it that makes it infinitely more funny. But they were thrilled with my using moisture. Now, and I didn't realize that until I said it, and I got the most tremendous laugh on that line that I didn't anticipate it. Well, so a lot of the time, it was something like that. And in the big thing that you remember, where I used the 6 telephones on a Judy Garland show, what? No, I'm sorry. This is not the grocery. No, it's not the grocery. I'm sorry. Finally, I said, okay, this is a grocery. What do you have? Right? Okay. Because one of the people sponsors was General Foods. So we can't use the word, you can't answer the grocer that it's the grocery. I said, that's going to take out a large bulk of my laughter. It's not a dirty word. It's not bad. I said, I can't take it out. I refused. They bleeped it. You didn't hear it bleep because on that particular recording, it's not bleeped. But it hurt that moment terribly because the word grocery was anathema to that ad man and to his people. What? General Foods would get mad. What the hell could that? All right. So we had a lot of restraints that weren't necessarily because hell and damn. Just that we knew we weren't going to say hell, we weren't going to say. We certainly were never going to say shit. We were certainly not going to do. All right. Now you get a show today. You have this big thing. We were forward. We were an outspoken show. We broke down barriers. What barriers were broken down by NYPD Blue? What barriers were broken down? Do you really think I enjoy seeing two guys next to each other pissing in a urinal while they're talking? That was the big barrier they broke down, that you have the urinal scene. So what the hell good was it? What did it do for anybody? Well, that's one of the big things. Then it broke down a few other barriers. But then you had a newspaper, you have media who just love problems. They just love it. They can't wait to have problems. If there is no problem, they'll make a problem. See, they're so bereft today because the rain has stopped. They're so thrilled that they had rain because they had so much to talk about. Then one day I'm watching a football game. On this football game, there's an airline, Air Alaska, that shows how somebody can be really discomforted in an airline. You see the old man in the toilet, sitting on the toilet, reaching for the toilet tissue, and it's not there. And from the top, you're looking at this guy sitting, squatting on his toilet. Okay, that's one commercial. In another place, they have another commercial, a beer commercial, in which a woman is standing behind a horse that lifts its tail and farts, and you could hear the wind blowing, and you could see her hair blowing. Now, both of these were on a show which was a Super Bowl show, and that was a year ago. In the halftime, a girl almost lost a tit. In the halftime thing, which was covered in, the nipple, of course, was covered with a sterling silver nipple cup. And I thought I'd never get that out. But, all right. Oh, she didn't know it was going to happen. She just had that made for this. But, all right. What the pouncing on this show, the fining of the show, because of that almost that nobody noticed until the papers picked it up and television picked it up. Nobody, and anybody who noticed didn't give a shit. So I'm watching that kind of nonsense. We don't have restrictions today, or we don't have so much unrestricted. We have unrestricted people today, not unrestricted television. We have people abusing the privilege of just being open. I don't know. Is that on the air? My wife will answer it. But I don't think comedy was ever so totally limited that it couldn't express itself in the old days or today. I mean, and if it's limited, it's only because some buyer is afraid. Some buyer wants to wash his hands of a problem here. But the commercials, nobody complained about the commercials.
Well, address the license of cable television. You're involved with the probably most deliciously funny show anywhere, and there's no restriction to language. I know. So what can we do? We had a show last year, a year and a half ago, which was the closing show of the season, where a guy had the chef had Tourette's syndrome, and swore. So in order to make him feel better, this one swore, and this one swore, and this one swore, and they all started saying all of these filthy, terrible expressions, and you realize as you're listening to all this stuff being done incidentally, in the sweetest, most generous of terms, to make another human feel good. But all of this terrible chat, when you come right down to it, had no meaning whatsoever. It was just a lot of dirty words. I recall saying it to my son. I said, Josh, she called me the fuck word, the F word, Daddy. She called you the F word. Say the word. I can't. Say the word, Joshua. Fine. Does that sound terrible to you? It's because somebody told you it's a bad word. If nobody told you it was a bad word, you wouldn't know. What did it do to you? Did it hurt your mouth? Did it hurt your teeth? What did it do? It'll upset somebody because it's a bad word. It's not a nice word. But I want you to be able to say that word. And don't say F to me. Say the word. It's not such a terrible word. And when I heard her say it, now my daughter, we went after, and he went after her to not say it. So what is the big thing? We decide what these words are. And if we make no decision except that they're terrible, so what?
I don't use the words, but I know why they came about in comedy. I know that in a certain era in our comedy life, in the history of our country, we had a time that generated so much anger and upset. There was a war in a place that most of us couldn't find on a map. And it was for reasons that most of us could never understand, a domino thing. Everything would turn communism. We didn't know what the hell that was either. We didn't give a damn. We knew that it was bad. So we knew that we should have to fight it, but I didn't know we'd have to die over it. I didn't know we'd have to send people over there to kill and to burn and to get burned and get killed at such cost, such terrible cost. I mean, we'd look at the papers just to see the score. I mean, we'd see the score and we'd feel better if more of theirs died than ours. That would give, it's great. Hey, we won this time. So we had that war going on. People didn't like it. They didn't understand it. They didn't want to go there, but they were told that that's right. If you don't go, that's bad. If you do go, that's good. So you had a lot of people didn't want to go. They were running off to Canada, and they were getting very upset about this. At the same time, around that same period, you had the Supreme Court saying there's no such thing as separate but equal. You had an awful lot of people at that same time who seeing a preoccupation of ourselves with that Vietnam over there, but people who said, okay, now that it's set, now that we've decided, there's no set, so when does the equal begin? Okay, we're going to get started now with that equal, so we're getting a little impatient here. So we had the war, they didn't want to go there. You had all kinds of turmoil beginning, and these people who said, where's the equal? So you had that happening in our country at the same time in the 60s and 70s, in the 60s particularly, and things were getting very uncomfortable for us here. We heard some loud voices about this. Some kids went over there to an Olympics during this mess and saluted the wrong way with a black glove. They were very unhappy with what was going on. They didn't like what was going on in our country. Little things were happening. A group called the Symbionese Liberation Army was started. And then they had another group. The Black Panthers were started. These people were terrifying us. They were frightening us. Chicago 7 frightened us. They destroyed, and that happened then too. They destroyed the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Pretty soon, a kid named Mark Rudd took over Columbia University. We're in big trouble in our country. There's such anger. The establishment is saying, here's what we should be doing. This is the right thing. Now you had a lot of people saying, hey, maybe we know something better. Like a kid by the name of Mario Savio from Berkeley campus who comes out with a sign saying, fuck you. And we began a speech movement in our country, and something wonderful happened here. We started thumbing our nose at the establishment and with a righteous anger against their telling us what is good and what is bad. Kids were burning their draft cards. Girls were burning their bras. It was all kind of upsetting for us. And what happened then with the opening of free speech, you had a comedian by the name of George Carlin. You had a kid by the name of Richard Pryor. And they started disturbing us. And they disturbed us in exactly the right way. The way we do it when we hit our thumb with a hammer and we say, goddamn son of a bitch. We said something unpleasant. So from that outrage, from that anger, from that sudden spurt of rage in our nation, we started talking dirty. We started coming up with very disturbing concepts, very disturbing language. And other comedians were picking it up too. A kid who is now dead, who didn't belong in his own generation, was now resurrected and put here. Lenny Bruce came here to this time. He died a little bit too soon. So he was resurrected. They gave him a play. They gave him a movie. A book. It was a very important thing for Lenny to come back because here he belonged. That's why he was brought back. Not to enshrine him. It happened. Don Rickles, who was a star at that time, now became a superstar. A tunnler by the name of Shecky Green, who was working in a small room, now became, because he was such a tunnler, he was so upsetting, he now took over the big room. People now are becoming stars, superstars. But Buddy Hackett, who was a star, now became a superstar because he was very disturbing in his comedy. What happened then? Then when it all went away, when it all started disappearing, when Vietnam was over, and the equality began a little bit, that separate but equal was starting to fade away, when that was happening. But what happened to comedy? Bereft of anger, they kept the package. The package, the fuck you package, stayed with us. And it hasn't left us yet. We're wondering, why the hell are they talking like that? It began over there. It sold. So it's selling today, but without the substance. That's why we're there. And a lot of it is in the degradation of women. And we're encouraging it. She's my hoe. Bullshit, she's your hoe. You get sick, your hoe becomes your nurse. That's what happened. And that's what you're looking at today. And if you disagree with me, up to you. Now, this is part of my lecture, incidentally. So you don't have full rights of this, but we'll talk.
Where do you see the future going of comedy?
Huh?
The future of comedy.
Future of comedy? The future of comedy is happening. The future of comedy is now happening with the imitations, and the imitations are rife. The imitations of a retro comedian by the name of Larry David. What he does is take all of the fools that ever lived, just as Fatty Arbuckle did it. He said, I'm the fat man, so what can I do wrong? Everything's going to happen to me. Just as a guy in the office who's cheated and wanted the girl, always got in trouble with the boss and was hanging out of windows, Harold Lloyd with his big glasses. He didn't, just like the guy who always failed at love, who will always, always fail at love, Harry Langdon with his big eyes. Just as he did it, just as Chaplin did it, just as Buster Keaton did it. This guy takes on all of humanity's flaws. They all took on flaws. Laurel and Hardy had this wonderful new way to succeed, invariably. That's what I'm going to do. And Laurel would follow him to the ends of the earth. But they were cheap. They wanted to win. These guys would cheat to win. Not a little bit. I mean, not a whole lot of cheating. A little bit of cheating. A little bit of smartness. Outsmarting the next guy. But it didn't work for them, ever. So the thief in us was there. The cheater in us was there. And we were laughing. We loved him. We loved them because they were attacking the authority figures at that time. And we hate the authority figures anyway. Okay, now, Buster Keaton, always being chased by a mob, always climbing up a ladder that doesn't have another end. It's not attached to another end. He suffering. But Buster Keaton did not know how to express himself. You've got this guy, Larry David, who doesn't know how to express himself properly, makes the wrong choices. He chooses to be the bore. He chooses to be the schmuck in us all. But we see ourselves every time we turn around because we're prismatic human beings. We look around and we see, that's us, that's me. I'm the cheap one, but nobody knows. Every lie we've ever told, every sniveling little thing we ever did, every time we had constipation, every time we worried about ourselves, every time you smelled under your arm to see if you were okay. He knows it. He does it. And it's being equaled. Humanity is making a comeback. The hope is for comedians like him who are willing to be the fool. who are willing to let the audience say exactly what I hear so often. Oh, I love the show, but he makes me nervous. He makes me nervous. He's our hope. He's the hope for human comedy. And it's got to come back to us sooner or later. He's not an old-fashioned comic. He's a retro man. He is bringing everything up, using everything he can. And take a look. Listen to the music. Listen to HBO's music for his show. Listen to that crazy little... and how different is it from... How different is it from Laurel and Hardy? And he didn't even realize it when I talked to him about it yesterday. He says, yeah. When I told him exactly what he is, he said, yeah. I had the chutzpah to tell him what he's doing. You wanted to talk to me about comedy? You wanted some pat answers? Forget it. You wanted short answers? Not on your life.
You know, we've been talking a lot about the greater role of comedy for society, for history, the importance of it for all of us. I wonder how important has comedy been in your life?
Well, it gave me a career. Comedy has given me a career. But comedy that I've seen and what it has done for me is the same as it has done for everybody. It's articulated the nonsense of my time. It's helped me bear with it. I remember as a boy watching Danny Kaye doing his nonsense in a time when we were getting into World War II, when he did a movie called Up in Arms. When he was doing absolute, utter nonsense in a time when we had to go through the draft or enlistment and take the physical exam that could lead us into the Navy or the Army or the Marines and to death. We were afraid of dying. The comedy, this man made me laugh at the situation. But you could sit and weep over it. You could sit and gloom over it. But there were people who articulated those feelings for me, particularly the nonsense of it, who show me, hey, it's just craziness. You're looking at craziness. You're living with craziness. Wake up. So then a couple of guys who were even crazier on a smaller level. One guy wanted to know how to play baseball, and the other guy told him. The only thing is the names of the players were terrible for him, because who was on first? And I realized, yes, it is a time of craziness. It is a time that makes no sense whatsoever. And thank God somebody noticed that. Thank God. But of course they weren't conscious of what they were doing. They were just doing it because whatever it is, whatever godly inspiration there is, was happening to these people without being able to say, here's what I'm going to do. They never did that. It just came out of them. And the other guy who said, the quicker the joke, the better the joke. Henny Youngman. And he was able to do it. It never made sense. It didn't make sense. But it just, we laughed. We laughed. And I was able to see that. I was at Great Lakes Naval Hospital, and I was watching this guy, Kate Smith, sang God Bless America, and she introduced this fellow with the fiddle. It was so much easier to bear. We were lonely. We were frightened. We were writing our parents letters. I was going to be a hospital corpsman. I don't know. I'd be I'd be out at sea and I'd sink and I would die. But we somehow weathered it. We survived. But part of our survival was the spirit that was imbued to us by these marvelous people who could ease the pain and articulate it for us. Say, here's what's bothering you. They didn't say it clearly, but they didn't have to say it clearly. What was bothering me wasn't clear either. But once you could put your finger on it, once you could say, okay, this is what it is. Oh, Christ, yeah, this is the exam. This is what's going to happen to me. And then these guys were in the army, Abbott and Costello. And those things helped. Then afterwards, after that war, when we came through it, and then now people were being told that I have to shut up. People were being told that somebody next to you was a communist or you're a communist, and we have to be afraid of that because that will take over the whole world. And they'll kill our country, and they'll take over the United States by force and change our government, and we got to find out who they are. Did you ever do this? Did you ever know somebody? The artists were being very, very cautious. And things that generally advance in time were now sort of marking time. We were idling a bit. This is another part of my lecture. My lecture is about history, not the history of comedy, but what we're laughing at a certain time in our lives and in the life of this country. Let me tell you something. There was considerable repression. There was a comedian who could keep making it. He was good. He began with World War II, and he went all the way through because he only made jokes, good jokes, and they were always safe. And so Bob Hope just nailed it. He was safe. John Wayne was safe. Now, these were safe people. You could always make political jokes as long as they were cute and frothy and didn't do anything. But there was a time there when the comedians had to be very, very careful. And acting had to be careful. It was all God Bless America, it was all. So when Sid Caesar comes out of that, because he's so intensely personal, he's so personal. I mean, there's nothing on the outside that can hurt him. And all those writers that you talk to, Larry Gelbart, all those writers, Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, all these wonderful, wonderful people are coming out and nurturing it. What was making them nurture this? Because the wonderful thing is they could say anything they want, except they knew they weren't going to go out there. It was going to be inner-directed comedy. And what is when they talk about Jewish humor, it is invariably inner-directed. And Jackie Gleason, can you believe it, was a Jew in his humor. In his own humor. Red Skelton was a Jew when he did the old man at a parade, trying to see the parade and trying to eat. And everything. It was all inner-directed, all inside. All here with God, where God is here. Now, I tell you, the Godhead is right there. And wherever the Godhead is, you'll find the Jewish humor. Now, I'm not talking strictly religiously. But it begins here. It begins in the creation. It's not there. Yes, some Jews are satirists, but it's not frequent. Some people think Jewish humor is Becky and Maxie. It's not that. It's not that. You could take any Lou Holtz joke, the great Lou Holtz, not a football player, not a football coach. There was a Lou Holtz who stood with a suit and a cane, a walking stick, and he was more debonair than Myron Cohen. Very debonair. Well, Sam Lapidus goes into a supermarket and wants to buy, goes into a grocery and he wants to buy salt. And he says to the proprietor, do you have salt? The proprietor says, do I have salt? Come, take a look back here by the shelves, here by the counter. Look, see, salt, box of salt, bag salt, see, canned salt, salt. Over here, salt. See? Come on downstairs. I'll show you salt. Goes downstairs. See? See? More salt. Big bag salt. Look, kegs, salt, barrels, salt. I got salt. And Samuel Peter says, I'm very impressed, but do you think you'll be able to sell all this salt? And Lou Holtz and Samuel Peters and the grocery says, me? I can't sell salt. But the guy who sells me salt, oh, can he sell salt? All right. Do you know that I have told this joke as a joke between Patty and Al, both with Irish brogue? Patty goes into the grocery. She says to Al, me friend, have you got any salt? And I tell it with the Irish brogue, and it comes out and it still makes people laugh. So it is not necessarily Jewish humor. Jackie Mason is not necessarily Jewish humor. Shalom Aleichem is not necessarily Jewish humor. It turns out to be that he is, because he creates a character who is totally taken by the Godhead, totally consumed by his Godhead. Do you find me passionate about the subject?
Understatement.
It's wonderful, Shelley. I so appreciate you sharing this, and that
my whole lecture, don't steal all this.
Actually, we haven't talked about that.
Boy, could we sell this tape?
Yeah.
I wish we could all come to the classes.
Well, I'm going to do I'm doing my lecture tomorrow night.
Are you?
At the Platt Library here in the area.
I'm sure Emerson will be inviting you to come to Boston to share there.
Huh?
Emerson College, that you're doing this, sharing your brilliance with. We're going to put together a master's class at some point.
Okay.
And you're, in behalf of Jackie Liebergott, the president, and Robert Silverman, the vice president, in charge of officially invite you.
Okay.
And there will be lavish food, money, women, whatever you need.
Yeah. All right.
Not necessarily in that order.
Mr. Berman, I just wonder, after hearing you, this is your life. I mean, would there be anything else that you could think of that you would have done other than be a serious dramatic actor, but to be in front of an audience? I mean, anything else that you would have, any other way your life would have taken?
Well, I'd have to be in front of an audience, I think. So, one way or another, I might have become a magician if somebody had shown me a few tricks. But I'd have to have been in front of an audience. I'm a compulsive show-off. Here I have, an audience of maybe 7 people, and I'm still swinging. You know. No, it's not just ordinary. I have to be there. I guess maybe when I was a kid, you couldn't be heard in my house. That's all. Nobody could. I couldn't be heard. Nobody ever heard a word I said for the first 15 years of my life. The only people who ever heard a word I said were my teachers, my fellow students. The teachers, I drove them crazy. But I couldn't. Nobody ever talked. Never ever heard. Listened to me. That they might have been loving. I don't know. They were good. They didn't deny me what I needed. My father is a composition. The play, I do a thing about my father, but it was a composition of both my parents, who did help me go to school, study the theater, but didn't understand it, neither of them. But, so ultimately, I guess if you wanted to be heard, you'd make a lot of fuss, and you'd do whatever you could to attract attention. I guess that's what I was doing.
I mean, you sacrificed a lot, both you and Sarah in the formative years of your career.
What's that?
You sacrificed a lot. You drove a cab. You taught at Arthur Murray. You had a lot of odd jobs because you were building towards this, but you never seemed to give up the dream.
There was no way to give it up. No way to give it up. But it was all theatrical. It was never to be a comedian. And no, there was no sacrifice. We just struggled. We struggled. Sarah struggled.
I've just been handed a note. I know that we're trying to wrap up here, but there was one area that we haven't touched on, which is the business side of comedy. And perhaps there's lessons you care to impart about the problems, the unexpected problems that arise from becoming famous. When Inside Shelley, Berman was the first comedy album to sell over 1 million copies, it launched you into a different direction. And were you prepared for that? And
no, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. For a moment there, it went right to my head. And I remember that we were still living on Jones Street in the Village when we were overwhelmed by the success. And we were looking for a place going uptown, But for the first time in many, many years, I said, Sarah, I think maybe I can buy 2 suits at one time. And she agreed. So we went to this store in the Greenwich Village, and I found 2 suits, and I loved them both. And we wrote a check, and the guy said, can I have your identification, please? And I said, you really need my identification? And yes. So I said, can I talk to your manager? Manager came on. He said, do you need my identification for a check? I said, no, Mr. Berman. So I signed that check, and we went out. We left the suits for alteration, naturally. And my wife is not talking to me. What's the matter? So who the hell do you think you are? So what? What did I do? Who the hell do you think you are to embarrass that young man, that salesman? Who are you that he didn't know you? What is this? What kind of a man are you? Well, Jesus. Should I go back and apologize? No, but come on. Yeah, it was a learning experience. I had no idea I'd gone that far. To embarrass somebody who didn't know me. He should have known me, for God's sakes.
The business aspect of it, was there a point where you realized you were a commodity beyond the art?
I didn't know. I never realized I was a commodity. I only knew I was a successful performer. I didn't count anything. I got a business manager. I got a financial manager, a business manager, and a lawyer. I would get eventually a road manager. So I had about 4 people. And a secretary. Oh, that's right. I was really getting up there. Eventually, they would all take me. Eventually. But I didn't know that. I would run into a terrible, terrible problem. I was playing Florida. I got to play Florida. It was a week in Florida, in Hollywood, Florida. And opening night was pretty damn good. I was breaking in a new road manager, a fellow by the name of Marty Klein. And he was a kid. So I'd teach him how to watch my contracts, what to do, and teach him how to run my show. And opening night, big show, because I was a big success, big star. And the next night, I beg your pardon, the third night I was there, as I'm working, a phone rang backstage, and I finished my show, everything was okay, I went backstage, and Marty, where was that phone? He said, you can't have phones ringing back here, you know. He showed me there were phones. I said, I'll tell you what, before the show, make sure you unhook these phones. Make sure so that we don't have any more problems. Because, you know, I do a phone act. I don't want to get the bad idea here. And the fifth night I was there, of all things, the phone rang again. It rang in the middle of a very, very delicate routine in which there is a poignant moment. Apparently, I am my father talking to me on the phone. And the love of the father for the boy becomes very, very clear. And it generally makes the people cry. It's just a nice piece. But it was just at that transition when the phone rang again. I finished the routine. It went very nicely. Big applause. But it was the last routine of my show, and I did it, toast to the audience, and it was nice. Everything worked out in front over here. And then I got on stage and raised Holy Hell. When I was being documented, I had a camera on me all the time. Prior to that, for 2 months prior to that, they took me to the Army-Navy game where JFK was the president, and I was, they shot me at all kinds of things, seeing kids, meeting kids. And it was kind of nice things, shopping with Sarah. It was all our life together. And so this, by now, the camera meant nothing to me. They had cameras all over the place. But now they're shooting me while I'm saying, for Christ's sakes, you killed the whole goddamn act. You can't do that. Look at these phones. And I took the phones. I said, oh, it's so easy. You take the phone off the hook and you leave it off. I didn't pull it off a wall. Picked it up off the hook, dropped it down there. That's how it didn't have to worry about that. Then I went upstairs. I was mad, walking through the hall. And then I read about it the next day. March 3rd, 1963. I became a pariah for lacking forbearance, for being so damn temperamental, for being impossible to work with, for being so demanding, for being an egotist. But what had happened is that the first phone call now became the second phone call. The second phone call now became the first. So that my reason for blowing my stack was now over there instead of over here as the first time. So the editing made it more dramatic show, but it was not what happened. And when I saw the rough cut with my agents and everybody, and I said, it could make me look like a jerk. I said, what can I do about that? Shelley, it's you. You look like you're proud of your show, and it's very dramatic. Well, what do you think I should do? I don't know. What do you think? Sarah, what should I do? Nobody knew. Should I change it? Should I go after them? And I couldn't see myself as others saw me. Couldn't. So I said, the hell with it. Let it go. So working from then on became a nightmare. I couldn't ask for what I needed, I would have, because it was always called a demand. If I demanded what I needed, it was called a screaming fit. Everything was amplified. Then I became the subject of a lot of conversation amongst my peers who really didn't understand or didn't give a shit. So now it became harder and harder for me to find work. And if I found work, to ask for a light was the hardest thing in the world to get. To ask for a better mic. Hey, don't give us any trouble, Shelley. We're giving you what we got. I had that. I went back to Mr. Kelly's where I started. And they knew how I worked because I'd been back there every year because my loyalty was to Mr. Kelly's in Chicago. I went back to Mr. Kelly's and I see the manager of the room and he's talking to the help. I came in the afternoon. He's talking to all the help, the waiters, the waitresses, the busboys, the maitre d's. See, when Shelley's on, nobody move. You understand me? Nobody move. See, I go to him, what are you doing? You know me. You know I don't ask for that. You know me. Well, Shelley, we just don't want to upset you. But you know me. You knew me when I was a baby. I couldn't even talk to the audience. I was afraid. Why are you doing this? You know me. Shelley, it's better. Don't worry about it. There was no way from then on to just go in and do a job. I'm not talking about that it became harder. I'm talking about the impossibility of it. To live with that reputation, and reputations have a tendency to get a patina. They grow more and more beautiful. They grow more and more handy. They begin to sparkle. And they begin to be used. The agents use it. The agents were doing it. Don't get upset, Shelley. I just want to talk to you. Why would I get upset? Well, I just don't feel like you should get upset. Let me talk to you about this. And if you do get upset, the way a performer has to get upset sometimes, the way any human being, you can't be denied the opportunity to just be upset. You can't be denied the opportunity to demand what you need in order to do your show. So that's when we manufactured the stool. That's where it all began. You had to make it. You can't ask for it. That's when I started asking for a little less work on the lights and asking for this. And the quality of the show was suffering. Just a few years before I realized there was no money. I had 2 children, a wife, I had a home, Beverly Hills, but we couldn't afford it. I wasn't getting a lot of important work. So the business end was then horrible. We declared personal bankruptcy. Small people that I knew and that I respected now couldn't get a nickel from me. My kids, well, it was a tough time for them. So they had to get yanked out of private schools, and not elementary, regular schools were okay. Pretty soon I started getting work in dinner theater. It was kind of hard there because now I had a terrible reputation. Now I did in San Diego, big, wonderful, lovely theater, stock theater, and we were doing, I had a marvelous opportunity to do Damn Yankees. I played the devil in Damn Yankees. I love that part. And the girl playing Lola, wow, she was good. But one day I see her in rehearsal, and I see she having a problem with this song. And I went over to the band, the leader. I said, can't you transpose this a little bit? Take it a note down, one note down. Can't you do that for him? She said, yeah. I said, well, why don't you do that? Give her a break on this because it's too high for her. I know. Well, why make her struggle? You do it? Sure. I walk away. She runs after me with tears in her eyes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was so terrified of you, I was afraid to even ask you. Why were you terrified of me? Well, you heard. Yes? Okay. So, when people are afraid to work with you, then you know. For absolutely certain, the thing I was looking for, a sitcom that was out of my life. That would not happen. It was not going to happen. First of all, when people know you're absolutely that you're trouble, they're buying trouble, you don't get that. So all of those things that I wanted in my career, an acting job, and a comedy, where I knew I could shine, I wasn't getting. I wouldn't get. People were afraid of me. Reckless talk was hurting me. We little by little started coming through. Little by little, I'm starting to come through. My son is 12 years old. My daughter's doing okay. She's 2 years younger. And we're starting to come through. We saved the home. Bankruptcy helped us through. We saved the home. We paid off California taxes. We were getting, these people had taken me quite a bit. But, no, I went to Las Vegas to do a production of Who Gets the Drapes. A fellow named Arnie Sultan wrote the play, and Gloria DeHaven would play my wife. And she was a difficult girl. She was very hard to work with. And, but the stage manager said, why are you giving her a bad time? I never did. I didn't even talk. I talked nice. I tried, but I was the one. I was the one who was making trouble. Whatever I did, there was no way out. So, anyway, we were working. I brought my son up there. I'm having a great time with him. We're at a table, with a phone. In Vegas, you have tables with phones in the restaurants. And we're having dinner together, a few of the actors and me. I call my son, because he's with me and my wife isn't. How you doing, Josh? So, what? Well, what's the matter, Josh? Are you all right, Josh? They're hearing only this. Josh, did you go near my liquor? Did you touch my liquor? They're laughing. So, Josh, did you take any medicine from the medicine? Did you take anything? All right, I'm going to come home after the show and I'll see you. I come home. I get him out of bed. Josh, stand up for me. Are you dizzy? Yeah. Can you talk to me, Josh? Well, everything's all right. Josh, you sound like you've been drinking. 12 years old, you've been drinking? No, he's 11 years old, you're drinking. No. Took him to whatever that hospital, Sunset Hospital. Everything's all right. By the time the weekend, I know I've got to take him home. I bring him home. It takes 2 weeks before the diagnosis is in. He has a brain tumor, a medulloblastoma. So, just as things were perking up, things start perking up. There's nothing heroic, believe me, about a comedian getting laughs when his kid's dying. In a movie, it would be heroic. In real life, you get up there, you do your fucking job, and you go home, and you take care of your kid. We would go through a year and a half, and then we'd lose him. That was sad. So the temperamental son of a bitch, the asshole that they can't work with, now lost his son. I got a few calls. But then I realized to my horror, on the day that his funeral, I realized to my horror, of all the people I've known, all the agents, everybody I've run, I didn't have 10 men for $1 million. Believe me, television can be awfully bad when it wants to be. You want to use any of this shit? Don't. Please don't use this shit. If you want to say it's tough on a comedian sometime, you may. But I'd rather you squashed it down, because it sounds like I'm singing the blues. And as a matter of fact, right now I am. I remember this very, very vividly. But work has been hard. Since that, work has been hard. I'm trying to be so careful, but there's certain things I have to have in order to perform. And it's still hard to ask. Because when people know you're a pain in the ass, it's awful hard.
These are important lessons for, I think these are important lessons for people to hear, though, about you really have to protect yourself and know who your friends are in this business, because it can be really tough. As life can be tough.
Well, it's not knowing who your friends are. It's just people who have never even met you know you're difficult. I go with these guys. I've never been a joiner. I joined this group. And I've had difficulty.
Do you think that being on Curb Your Enthusiasm now, you got the call from Larry David, he sought you out, basically, has in any way changed your image?
I don't know. People like me. They see me. The image, you don't change that. The image will never, that will never be changed. That will never be fixed. You die with that one. I met a guy, Don Imus, paid him a big compliment and says, "Hi there. I saw you gave your speech. You were very, very funny. So I hope you know who I am." I said, "Yeah, I know you. You tore a phone off the wall."
What would you rather people remember about your career other than that incident?
That I'm a good comedian, I guess.
a good actor?
I think perhaps over that, being a good actor. Now, I know that I've worn you to death here with all of this.
Not at all.
It's been brilliant, absolutely. The little gag thing that we shared one time in Florida over breakfast.
Oh, well.
And you've done what you say. Don't do anything with this. That's it. Why Shelley Berman has to do a one-man show is the most poignant.
Your whole career, though, it seems, just as today you've been so generous with sharing this with us, the seed to me of your comedy and watching you has been this generosity of a willingness to share with an audience of yourself and to share the things that you've picked up and noticed, the sensitivities you have to life and to the obstacles and challenges of life. And that's what I think, your legacy has been. So I thank you.
Got a Kleenex?
Yeah.
Shelley Berman at 12 Kleenex performance.
Well, thank you so much. Was there anything that you?
If there's anything left.
While you have the soapbox, is there anything left?
That you know, sometimes even I get constipation. No.
Well, there's the answer. That getting us all off the hook with a laugh. That's what comedy is.
It's a gift.
You only heard it from me, That's all.
But the way that you've described it, I've never heard or seen you describe it before, the whole story of the comedian backstage. I mean, you've really clarified it for the record. I mean,
yeah.
And it's a shame that you were never given a chance to put it right. And I guess maybe it was bad advice or...
Have you been able to share this?
No.
In this?
I've tried incrementally to clarify it, but nobody, the press never really grabbed it, and the media have not contributed much in clarifying it. So it just, it's one of those damn things. You can commit murder and get paroled. Me, it's life. It's been, I'm still, I hate to sing the blues, but it really happened. And it happened the way I say. It was just, it's awful. Because I hear you're pretty tough, Shelley. Yeah. Yes, I guess so. I want to do my show. I want you not to stop me from doing what I came here to do. I just stop it. Don't. If you can't help me, then just get out of my way, for God's sakes. Let me find a way.